So it's a personal honor and delight to have who was my boss, mentor. Him and his wife are our second family in Las Vegas in the past 15 years. Mr. Sheldon G. Adelson is our Fireside Chat guest. It's the first time I think that I can ask all the questions and you need to answer and you need to behave and all this stuff. If you don't like the question, Flavia wrote them, so she can blame her. Flavia is my wife. It's a better chance that she's going to get in trouble than I do. So Mr. Adelson is an internationally renowned businessman, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. His business career spanned nearly 7 decades and has included creating and developing to maturity more than 50 different companies. Is this correct? I got it from Ron Rees, and so can blame him as well. Sheldon Adelson is what we say in Hebrew, the ultimate startupist. With an innovative, strategic, and entrepreneurial mind, his achievements include countless real-life examples of successful innovation, new business model, new products, and new markets. He is a living proof that being an outsider can work as an advantage, and what we can create, and that we can create opportunities by transferring know-how among different businesses. Adelson's story comprises many stories with the common theme of boldness, breaking paradigms, and challenging the status quo. Please join me by welcoming Sheldon Adelson. So,
thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, when's lunch?
Okay, lunch. Can we arrange something for to eat? What do you want? It's all kosher.
Kosher?
Yeah. We can arrange everything. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is an application.
I don't think so. Not in this building.
I'm sure there is an application. We can order something from a kosher, non-kosher, from a Jewish deli in Boston. I'm sure everything. We can 3-print a sandwich from a deli.
It's a long ride over here.
We can do everything. So we are here to talk about some of the businesses that you were involved in, and really to understand. And we're going to focus specifically on the one that were around tourism. Want water?
No.
And specifically about tourism, talk a little bit about trade show, and these areas. So when you go back in the 60s, you created a charter tour business that flew mainly to Hawaii and the Caribbean called AITS. I thought it was a mistake because I thought it was GWV, but there were two different companies.
GWV was after. AITS.
So AITS was in the early 60s. It was a charter, flew mainly to Hawaii or to the Caribbean as well.
AITS was both a tour operator and a ground operator. We, at that time, TWA had a in-house tour operation, and we conducted the ground operations for them, for TWA in Hawaii, in Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, or maybe in Europe, I can't remember. In the 1960s, that's 60 years ago. At least 55 years ago. Give me a break.
Okay, I'll give you a break. Here, this is what I know. I know you're going to correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to correct me anyway. So let's. This is what I gathered, that eventually it became the biggest travel agency in New England, and you took it public. The stock price.
It was a tour operator.
Yeah, and the stock price soared from $10 to $93.
About 100.
Yeah. Almost.
But who's counting?
Yeah. So, what did you see about? I mean, this is obviously it's a very.
We should have sold it at that time. It went back down to zero.
Yeah, yeah, but this part I let you talk about. But it went down to zero. So let's talk about the successful part first. because even failure, we learn from failure sometimes more than successes. So what did you see
Well,
about
I'd
this?
rather not learn from failure. I could rather learn from a book or from somebody else's experience. You know who ended up with it? He's an Israeli, Shalom Rickless.
Yeah,
He ended up buying out the company at the time. And I can't remember the year.
it was like, I think like 69 or something else.
Whatever. He ended up, the fellow who was running it, I was only the investment guy, put together the whole investment, and I put some money in, and I took the company public. And in those days, we didn't say IPO, we said going public. And I did 2 or 3 offerings. I did the initial public offering, the IPO, and I did a secondary. And then after that, the company got involved in some ships. It was very interesting because the fellow they got to run the ships, his name was Ted Adelson. I'm sure you all know the name. And Ted Adelson, we had 2 ships, one called the Mardi Gras, the other called the Carnival. And Ted Adelson took the Carnival and built a big company out of it. Rick said to him, he came into the tour operation, and he found Ted that he knew from the War of Independence. And he said, Ted, I don't want the ships. Do you want the ships? And Ted said, yeah, I'd like the ships, but I don't have any money. He said, so Rickless said, don't worry about it. He said, you name the price you're willing to pay, and I'll name the terms. So Ted joked around with him, and he said, $1. So Rick said, cash. And then he said, then it got serious, and he said, okay, $100,000. In those days, 100,000, I don't know whether or not the ship was worth it, but
This is
look
like you're
what he
saying,
made out of it.
there are two happy moments in your life, one say. One is when you buy a ship, and one is when you sell a ship.
Right. Yeah, but that's
So I guess that's why you wanted,
that's
you
not
wanted
one
the
of those
$1.
not one of those big ships.
Yeah, this is the beginning. This is the genesis
bought,
of Carnival Cruise Line, what you are describing.
Beginning of Carnival Cruise Lines.
Which today, I think Carnival Cruise Line today is the biggest company in the cruise
world.
area.
They bought Holland
and they
America.
have 9 or 10 different brands. We used to work
Right.
with them. They have many brands, but Carnival is the main one.
The Carnival, the Princess, an Australian company.
Yeah, I don't know all of them.
He's done, what's his name, Mickey?
Yeah, Mickey Harrison.
Mickey Harrison did a fabulous job.
Yeah.
After his father passed away, he took over the company and he ran it. He did a fabulous job.
Yeah. Very good. So back to the next big interesting thing that is related to tourism, travel, but in a different vertical, was Comdex. So it's a less known fact that you were a successful entrepreneur in the technology business as early as in the 1970s. You founded Comdex, which became the world's largest trade show through much of the 1980s, 90s, and with a presence in many countries. Like the people here that are in technology, do you know Comdex? Do you know CS?
We produce Comdex in Israel. What do you mean?
You produced 30 years ago. They are only 25.
Where did you produce it?
Here for you,
Here in Israel?
After you sold it to SoftBank,
SoftBank.
SoftBank, yeah.
we worked with Jason Tudowski.
Yes.
Show our pictures together.
Okay.
This guy is David Italian. That's right. Thank you.
So Comdex. So Comdex was the biggest
It ca-
computer show
in the world.
in the world. So just to date here a little bit, because that's really important. You created Comdex in 1979.
Yes.
The first Apple One, the first PC was released in 1976. But you already start looking.
Apple One?
Yeah, you don't even know. Apple is not the fruit that we eat; it's the computer.
No. No.
It's not a very technical. That's the amazing part is
I'm very good at it. I know how to press send
delete.
and end.
Delete. No.
Delete? No.
No.
I don't have a delete on my telephone.
Okay. Yeah, you should add it. It's a nice function. Yeah. So what did you see about, industry that was it in infancy? How did you decide to do a trade show just in computers, something that you didn't really have any background in? Do you even consider it to be part of the technology business, or where you consider yourself just, it's a trade show and that's just a vertical that I'm focusing on?
I was a venture capitalist in the 60s. All the years go by so fast I can't remember them. In the 60s, 70s. And, when the market crashed in 1969, I had a partner, and the two of us looked at what we had, and we split up to try to bail out, try to save the companies that were failing because they all depended upon a second stage of financing, and there was no more public market at the time. So we split up various companies, and one company was a publishing company. And I had a little experience with publishing companies when I was young. My father published a taxi trade paper for the taxi industry. And I learned how to driving the plates and the layout to the printer, which was about, in those days, 35 miles away. And so I had a little experience there. So I said, okay, I'll take that one. And then I wanted to go into the condominium business. In those days, there were no condominiums in New England. I was born and raised in Boston. And nobody knew what condominiums were. And but I had heard about them, and I wanted to get into the business. Most people thought condominiums were a birth control device.
You made sure they figure out that it's not. Correct? No? Okay, no, I'm just...
I went to California, and I went to a show to learn about, there was a conference, and I went to learn about developing condos and converting apartments into condominiums. And when I got there, I realized that it was sponsored by the magazine in which I read about it. So I wasn't interested in going into the exhibit hall, but I saw some coffee and Danish pastry in the press room. So I said, well, I'm press. So I'll go in and chisel some coffee and some Danish pastry, which I did. And while I was there, the lady who was behind the desk was complaining about her boss. So I said, what's the matter? And so I gave her a shoulder to cry on, and she did. And I learned what the show was all about. This is a good way for somebody to develop an entrepreneurial enterprise. So I never seen what an exhibition was. And before I left that show, I was only there for a couple of days, I realized I was going to go into the show business. So I went
Trade show business.
Right. I went back to my office in Boston. I called the staff together of the publication. We were about to launch a new publication, So I thought we'd launch a new show at the same time. And so I told my colleagues about it. And one guy said, I know you could sing, Sheldon, but you're not that good. Said, we're not going into that kind of show business, we're going into trade show business. And I started off with a show in data communications. Believe it or not, in 1969, the world was totally different. The FCC, is it FCC, Communications Commission, disallowed anybody to connect to any of the AT&T network equipment anywhere throughout the United States. And that was before they broke AT&T into 7 or 8 different companies. And what's left today is the ATT that started out, a single company that built up. They had most of the money anyway. So I told my colleagues we're going to start the trade show. And we simultaneously started a trade publication called Data Communications Interface. In the 1960s, the FCC changed. There was a suit brought by a company called Carterphone, and it was known as the Carterphone decision in 1969. They sued the FCC and said there was no reason for them to prohibit anybody from connecting to the ATT system. And that changed the entire telephone voice data system in the entire United States. A little company from Dallas, Texas, they probably didn't have as much room as the room we're sitting in now. And they challenged the FCC and they won. So we started that. It gave birth to something called data communications. And it was a great happening. And it was something new. Nobody had started off with data communications, and I kicked it off with a show called Interface. And I held the first show in Dallas.
This was 73, no?
That was, no. 73.
I remember I was 3-year-old. I remember.
You were a 3-year-old?
Yeah.
Do you remember that when you were 3?
Yeah, this and Yom Kippur War. So how did you get to Comdex, to computers? Where did you decide to be involved in computers?
After I built the first show, the Interface show, I built 4 or 5 more, and I bought one that addressed the federal government in Washington, D.C. And then I saw that a lot of the exhibitors, I didn't have a lot of money and I couldn't hire a lot of salespeople. So I was one of the salesmen, these salesmen. I went out on the road and I sold companies to exhibit in the exhibition hall. That's where most of the money was in developing a trade show. So I got them to exhibit in the show, and when I went over the course of, say, a year, I had one show called Interface West, which had several components, and one of them was called microcomputer. Now, since I didn't know anything about high tech, a microcomputer implied that it was a small computer. It was really something different. And I kicked that off, and I saw that a lot of the companies whom I had approached to exhibit, I couldn't approach anymore because they all told me, I have a dealer or a distributor, go see him. And I started off in the West Coast. So they said, there's a West Coast dealer or distributor, go talk to them. I'm not going to handle the exhibits anymore. We're spreading out. So it seemed to me that with the price performance of computers, the price came down, the size of the computer came down, but the productivity went through the roof. And so I went to a show, my own show, the Interface West show, and I saw there were a lot of dealers and distributors that had been taking the place of companies running the booths directly. So I saw that the market was changing, and it appeared to me that it must have been something like the beginning of the automobile industry. You can't have one manufacturer cover every village and hamlet and town and city in the country, because nobody has that kind of whatever, those kinds of human and financial resources. So they adopted a model called dealers. So they got independent dealers in all these towns and cities around the United States. And I said to myself, well, it looks like that can be done in the computer industry too, because it was coming from what was then called Big Iron. These were custom-made, multi-million-dollar computers that specialized in the transaction business. So there were banks, and there were airlines, there were hotels, and they were all recording transactions. So I said to myself, what should I call myself? Hey, you? Huh?
Dude.
Dude. No, I don't think so. When I was a kid, a dude was somebody who'd, we'd go to dude ranches and we'd ride horses. When I was a kid, I'd go to a dude ranch and spend a week there and ride horses. So,
So you told self.
I forgot what I was told. I told myself.
So
Huh?
What? The interesting story about some unknown young entrepreneur named Bill Gates that took his father's credit card to buy a booth in Comdex and stories like this. Is this any true?
I don't know about that. We only
you
sold
were the
booths
salesperson.
We only sold booths for cash.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So it's
there
not
was
a true
no
story.
credit. The idea was to treat everybody the same. And once you started giving concessions to one company, then everybody else would find out about it. You'd have to give them all concessions. But Bill did call me about 6 or 8 years after I started Comdex in 1979. And he said, Shelley, he used to call me that. He said, how come you haven't called me to be the keynoter? I said, for the last few years. I said, I don't know. I said, I normally don't handle, I had a separate conference department that would make recommendations for who would be the keynoters and the speakers. And we had hundreds of speakers, hundreds of sessions. In one, it started off 3 days and then went to 5 days. That kicked off there were people in the industry that said that Comdex kicked off the personal computer industry, and that for that I was responsible. Well, the truth be known, I don't take any responsibility for kicking off the personal computer industry. I do take the responsibility for accelerating the development of the third-party distribution channel, which was dealers, distributors, and retailers. There were various sales offices. Nobody knew what to call them, and nobody knew what price to charge. So they one company, I think it was Digital Equipment, said we're going to charge them the OEM price. OEM means original equipment manufacturer. So whatever they sold in terms of processors or other pieces of the equipment or small business systems, the terminals, the displays, the keyboards, they would sell them under the OEM equipment. I came up with the phrase independent sales organization because nobody knew how to call their third-party distribution. So I said, okay, they're all ISOs. And that connected for 2 or 3 years. And then everybody started to call their own distribution department something else. And that was that Comdex. I started in 1969 in Vegas because I had the interface show there at the beginning of '79, and I saw that we were experiencing a certain trend line. And then when I went to Vegas, I went from city to city, then I went to Vegas, I spiked. So the attendees, the people who came, like you folks, the number of exhibitors, the size of the exhibit booths, all went up at least 50%, if not more. So I said to myself, I did some research after the show, and it seems that when people go to an event, go to a convention, they want to know that they can have something to do after they finish their work at the
Hold your thought for a second. I'm getting into it. You sold Comdex in 1995 for a small amount, 21 years ago, for a few bucks. I found it says $862 million, 21 years ago. Today, this company is out of business.
Yes.
10 years after you founded Comdex, you bought the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, and a year later, you opened the Sands Convention Expo Center.
No, before I sold.
No, 10 years after you founded Comdex, so in 1989, before you sold Comdex.
88. I signed the agreement in 88, and I bought it, and it closed in 89.
Correct.
We had to get licensed. That took a year.
So eventually, you had the vision to focus prime casino property in Las Vegas on the convention and trade show industry. At the time when other hotels were focusing only on gaming, it was a very unorthodox method that was mocked all up and down the Las Vegas Strip because people were saying,
Right again.
yeah. That's not what they were saying. They were saying that...
No, I was saying you were right again.
Yeah, I'm good. After almost 16 years, I'm finally Sheldon-proof, no? Sheldon ready. So in 1996, you imploded the Sands Hotel to make room for the Venetian in Las Vegas. Inspiration that struck you while you were in your honeymoon in Venice, Italy, with your wife Miriam.
I better have been with my wife Miriam. If I was with somebody else, I'd really be in trouble.
At that time, the traditional strategy, like we said, was to keep hotel rooms minimal, and to encourage guests to go out of the room and spend money in the casino. The Venetian, however, was a hotel with all luxury, suites, with mini bars, fax machine, big screen TV, gorgeous furniture, and very comfortable space to stay here.
Mini bars, safe with a light inside of it, and
I want to show you a small movie.
okay.
It's not about you, but it's a nice movie. It's a good movie.
Fantastic. Here's what you do.
Ocean
Guys in the
11.
vault will deposit 6 bags into the vault elevator. The elevator will rise to your cages. 3 of your guards will pick up the bags and carry them out into the casino. Now, if they take more than 20 seconds to reach the casino floor, or there's any indication a switch has been made, We'll blow the money in the bags and the money in the vault.
He's in the casino by the slots.
Of course I'm in the casino. In fact, I'm staying in your hotel. I have 2 words for you. Minibar.
Thank you. Minibar. So this movie, Ocean 11, was not filmed in the Venetian. It was filmed in a hotel that's going to stay nameless. Some no good hotel.
That
Somewhere.
was a good hotel.
Somewhere.
That was the Bellagio.
That was no good hotel. But the interesting thing about this movie, and most people, I don't even know if you know, I don't know if we ever talked about it, but the story is this is an internal joke of the cast. And basically, they had to stay at the Venetian with, at the Bellagio, a Steve Wynn property, and Steve Wynn was very much against minibar and anything to keep the guests in the room. And all these famous stars, all these celebrities had to stay in the room because they were shooting the movie. And they wanted minibars, but there were no minibars. So for them, they all the time had to order room service and go. And so it was this internal joke that he's telling him at the end to Andy Garcia, I have 2 words for you, minibar. Which brings us to the Venetian. The Venetian had in all the rooms minibar. And the thought in the past was, you want a Coke, you're going to go down to buy a Coke, and then you're going to play in the slot machine. The reality is that
Everything was surrounding, you had to go through the casino to reach anything. To reach the snack bars, to reach the casual dining, to reach the fine dining, and what do you call it when you got a bunch of small food?
amenities,
The what?
snacks,
Whatever.
everything.
Snack food. Oh, food court. Food court.
The food court. Yeah.
I said to myself that it was ridiculous that people had to go down there. There was one time they didn't even have TVs in the rooms because the owners of the hotels or the casinos were afraid that people would stay in the rooms and they wouldn't go down to the casino, they'd be watching TV, which is all ridiculous. So I put in a fax machine, which was also a printer and a scanner and something else, I forget.
Copier.
Copier, printer, scanner. I put in a safe that had a light in it. I mean, when you open a safe, it's dark. So you got to to select what you want, you got to fill your hand, run over to the nearest light source, and then pick what you want. So, but if you put a light in, just open the door and you can pick what you want while it's sitting there. So we had that. We had a makeup table, a magnified lit mirror. What else did we have?
On top of the room itself, there were many other things that were done with the Venetian
All the rooms were suites.
suites.
They still are.
They are. They were just renovated.
Were they?
At least last time I checked.
We're doing too much renovation. All of our properties.
So other than this, other than room we talked about, there were many other innovations that came out of in the business model. Part of it was the celebrity chef restaurant that really were outsourced, so you rented it to them. Some of it was obviously the midweek occupancy that was with the trade show and the convention. Very aggressive revenue management that at time was not used at all. Anything from upselling and
Yield management.
Yield management.
Right, you were the expert on
I
that.
know, I was the expert. I was the one that started charging for views, and Brad Stone, at that time he was one of the top executives, was mocking at me saying, like, who would pay for views in Las Vegas? What do we think, we're in Hawaii? And today, I think third of the rooms are view rooms because everybody wants to see the strip. But there were many, many, many elements that were part of the Venetian. And can you play the second video for a second?
Foodie, foodie, foodie.
shopping, dining, entertaining. The Grand Canal Shops at the Venetian.
Thank you. So the Grand Canal Shops were the shopping mall at the Venetian. It was part of the property. However, most people still don't know, the guests don't know, at a certain point you decided that you want to sell the real estate. Basically like saying, I'm going to sell a part of my hotel and keep the other part. And
I condominiumized the retail mall.
kind of. You
No, I condominiumized it. I separated, and we described what's called the meets and bounds, and then I sold it off.
Yeah. It sounds very easy, but I think it's the most complicated real estate deal ever done. And not let alone that how much did you sell it for? More than what you spent on building the Venetian.
No, 3/4 of what I spent building the Venetian.
Ah, okay, because that's
sold
without the palazzo.
I sold the
that was
first-
a bad deal. You should have negotiated better.
Well, I'm negotiating a lot better now.
Ah, okay.
We're selling half of our, we're looking to sell, we're talking about it, half of our mall in Singapore, which will be the highest priced mall in the world. And if you look at it, one can argue that the property in Singapore called Marina Bay Sands is arguably the most beautiful building in the world. It's the one with a
We'll get to
sky
Marina
park on
Bay
the
Sands.
top.
We'll get to it in a second.
Okay.
Okay. So again, here it's a very innovative way to say, to basically look at your business, say this is my core business, and this was not considered as a core. You build it, list it, and then when it got to a certain level, sold it and got
Paid
for
for
other
the core business.
Correct. So after this, from the Venetian, we went to Macau. Can you show the next video for a second? Thank you. So this is Macau. Tell us a little bit about.
It said 9,000 rooms. We now have 13,000.
I know because
We just opened up
the Parisian.
The Parisian. It's a huge hit. It's interesting. We didn't cannibalize any of the other 5 properties. It's the most unique facility in the world where we have 13,000 rooms, enough malls that comprise 850 retailers. We have 2.5 million square feet of what we call MICE, meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions space. We've got hundreds of restaurants. It said 58. That was only in the Venetian.
No, that's because this is for when we open Sands Cotai Central. Because I was trying to find a movie that shows different things, not just the room.
Okay, a lot of restaurants, several food courts, showrooms. We have a 15,000 seat arena. We have basketball games, tennis matches, mixed martial arts, boxing, etc. I discovered I developed and created the property known as Integrated Resort, meaning that there were 8 or 9 different components, like the restaurants and the mall and the casino and the rooms, etc. And now it's become a term of art in the development of hotels. That one, you could go to 13,000 hotel rooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 brands, 8 different brands, without going outside the building once. So it's on both sides of the street. What I call the area is known as Kotai. It's an acronym for the 2 islands adjacent. And it was filled in when I first saw it that there was a causeway. So I decided I would make it into a strip. So we call it the Kotai Strip, like the Las Vegas Strip. Now we have 13,000 rooms, and there's no facility like it anywhere in the world that has all the components and all the shopping and all the restaurants. You don't have to leave the building. You can go to 8 or 9 different hotel brands and never step out of the building.
Tell us a little bit how you chose the location versus downtown Macau. Like the analysts used to call it before the opening of the Venetian, the $2 billion bet, by putting the Venetian Macau in the Cotai Strip versus at Macau downtown.
I put in 13 billion already. The first property was the Venetian. It was 2.4 billion. And the Sands Cotai Central, there's 4 buildings standing like dominoes. That was 4.25 billion. And we just finished the Parisian, almost 3 billion. And we got a 4 Seasons, and
the Sands.
And the Sands is downtown. The government listen, I didn't know anything about Macau, so I went to the government and I said, you selected me to be one of the concessionaires. Now you got to give me some land. I don't have any land. So they gave me a piece of land to build the one on the peninsula where all the activity was. And then I said, well, that's for the temporary facility. What about the permanent facility? They said, well, you have to go out to Kotai. I said, what's in Kotai? They said, well, that's where your land is going to be. I said, okay. So my wife was with me. We went out there, and I didn't see any land. Water. It was all a bay and swamps. So I said to myself, I could fill that in, I could reclaim the land, and I could make a strip there. But I thought they were exiling me because they sent me away from what was the most popular place for the gaming on the peninsula, because Macau was made up of a peninsula, and the first island is connected with 3 bridges. 1, 2, 3, they're building a 4th. And then there's the second island, so the first and second islands are connected with a causeway. So I imagine the causeway would be the strip, and now everybody thought I was crazy. I offered Steve Wynn 50% of it, and he said, that's the most stupid idea I've ever heard of in my whole life. He just opened because he didn't have the right piece of land, and his property he's not ramping up yet.
Because he built for very, very high end, and now
the high end of the market has collapsed.
Yeah. Similar to what happened to him with the Bellagio in '98. The high end, and then when Southeast Asia collapsed.
in that business, he was smart enough to know many, many years ago that the market was in the Chinese and other Asians. So those were the people that came in. They weren't ordinary American Caucasians. There were some Chinese that live in Vancouver, in a town called Richmond in Canada, There's some from San Francisco, Chinatown, and there's some from Monterey Park in LA. And the Chinese are they're not addicted players, but that's their form of entertainment. When you and I will go out to dinner with friends or go to somebody's house, have a drink, have some coffee, they will go gamble. And if they're not going out to gamble, they will sit in each other's homes and play mahjong for money.
And karaoke.
And what?
They like karaoke as well.
They love karaoke.
And they don't drink at all compared to...
When they play.
When they gamble, they don't drink.
They don't drink.
So after this, let's play the last movie, please, is Singapore, Marina Bay Sands.
Journey into a world beyond all expectations. A testament to modernity. Breathtaking in its sheer originality. A commanding presence above all. Where a wealth of indulgence awaits.
He just walked through
And the ultimate experiences take center stage. Discover the power of play. Feel the connection. Share the excitement and give it your all. Marina Bay Sands, Singapore. Never settle.
They had an eye, like the London Eye, Ferris wheel, right next door to it. So as soon as we opened MBS, Marina Bay Sands, and we had a separate bank of elevators going up to the observation deck, the London flyer went out of business. The Singapore flyer went out of business.
So tell us, so as you mentioned, Marina Bay Sands is a single unit, is probably the most successful, profitable resort ever built.
In the world.
In the world. For now. I don't know building other than in the world, but at least on
There's no other single building as profitable as that.
When you open it, again, the analysts were mocking, you wanted a 5-year return on that specific investment, which is a 20% return. And the analysts also thought it was craziness. And I think you got it even faster than 5 years.
4 years.
4 years. So what is...
Cost me $6 billion, and I made it back in 4 years.
That property EBITDA make more than the entire chain of Marriott. Now Marriott is with Starwood, so let's say Hilton, from an EBITDA perspective, one property that obviously has a lot is conventions and room. And what was the main things? What was different about that property versus other properties that you built and developed?
It's an iconic property. I've learned that if I'm going to be allowed to open integrated resorts in any other location, I couldn't just build an ordinary building, a rectangular building, a square building, a vertical. I had to build something unusual. I have a design to build a gold. It's like a handbag. It's very narrow at the top, very wide at the bottom, and very high at the bottom. And I've got a whole book full of architectural designs, because every mayor, every governmental authority in the world wants a unique building for their city. And there isn't a city in the world that doesn't want nice business. So with my background in the trade show and the convention business, so I can bring the conventions, you started to say early, My objective was to take the weekend rate and the occupancy, the occupancy rate on the weekend and bring it into the midweek. And how would I do that? By bringing in conventions and exhibitions. And that would create the demand. We became the most successful hotel, the Venetian, in the world.
Very good. Any last word of wisdom to the many entrepreneur, technology people? One of the things that you always used to say that I learned from you is when you negotiate, if you want to negotiate well, you need to be willing to walk away from the deal.
That's true.
Another thing that you always ask me,
I'm
which
about to
part you
do
don't
that.
understand in
I'm
no.
about to do that on a deal today.
Yeah.
Today. I gave my people instructions. I negotiated to bring in the Oakland Raiders, an NFL football team from Oakland because they don't have a stadium there, that I would build a stadium and rent it out to the Oakland Raiders. But they want so much. So I told my people, tell them I could live with the deal, I could live without the deal. Here's the way it's going to go down. If they don't want it, bye-bye. They're only taking 10 days a year. There's 8 season games and 2 exhibition games. So that takes up 10 days. I've got 355 other days that I could rent it out to concerts. You know, groups like the Rolling Stones and other popular performers, and truck pulls, they call dirt events, motorcycle, mixed martial arts, boxing, tennis, even basketball. So the guy from the Oakland Raiders wants my income to go to him. So I told my colleagues, I said,
can I get your income to go to me? Can I get your income to go to me?
No.
A small part.
No.
I'm nicer than the guy.
Not
from
even
Oakland.
a teeny itsy bitsy part.
Very good, very good.
I'll spoil
he did not change.
you'll get spoiled.
It's okay, I'll manage.
Yeah, you'll manage. But negotiating, listen, in negotiating, you're right. You know, when 2 people get together and they start to negotiate a deal, there's always one person who wants the deal worse than the other one does. And what I've learned is that I don't need it. I could walk away from a deal no matter how much I'm in love with it. Because if I give in and the deal doesn't come out fair, the most important thing is to have a win-win situation where both parties in the deal win. Nobody is really taken advantage of or abused or exploited. The idea is to give both sides an equal result for a deal.
One other thing you always used to
I
tell
was
me.
just thinking about that. I bought an airplane and I did the interior of the plane in 8 months. And from the Middle Easterners that want to get the European companies, there's 2 major companies, 3 years to wait and 3 years to do it. That's 6 years. So I go to do it, and I said to my colleague, he said, how much we're going to charge? I said, make a lot of money per plane. So I said, they pay that for the other guys. So I said, so what? They'll pay me that. But I'm going to get it done a lot faster, and time is money.
Very good. So one of the things you always used
So
to
I'm sort of a little taken advantage of it. It's not a win-win situation, but that's okay.
It's okay.
The Middle Easterners.
So are we.
Well, it's the other Middle
Ah,
East.
the other. You always tell me, don't be such Israeli. Just, what if I had something to say? I said, don't be such Israeli. Wait, let me finish. And which part you don't understand in no? The N or the O? So most of the time I understood both of them quite well. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure and an honor.
That's it?
That's it. You want anything else? Go ahead.
Lunch.
They already ate. They ate. We invited you for
I want
lunch.
to get.
We'll send you something. We'll do a doggy bag.
You know, it's interesting. Of all the businesses, the dozens of businesses that I've been in, they were all travel related. I can't imagine, you know, in those days, if we used an 800 number, that was revolutionary. So people would call us as a tour operator, they would call us direct. But then the travel agents wouldn't sell our product because we were competing against them. So I got involved in travel retail, travel wholesale, tour operations, consolidation. I even had a charter airline, so that I took my own groups on the airline and I chartered out to others. So all of these, and then I went into the trade show business. So between the trade show, the conventions, the exhibitions, and the tour operators, and the travel agencies, there wasn't a part of travel that I didn't touch. I didn't have my fingers on. And having that, the demand factor, meant that I could have successful supply. So that's why I went to the hotel business. You think I knew anything about the hotel business before I started?
I'm sure you stayed in some.
No, I've stayed in some. But I knew absolutely zero about it. Nothing.
So which business is the one you like the most?
Which business that I've been in out of 50 businesses do I like the most? The one I'm in at the time you asked me the question. Right now I'm in the integrated resort business, and our company has a market cap of give or take close to 50 billion. We're in the Fortune 100 in terms of market cap. I think it's the best business in the world. I talked to my investment banker, Goldman Sachs, and he was telling me, my contact guy, he said, you got the best business in the world. I said, come on. I said, you must have, what about all the oil companies? You know, the infrastructure companies. So you must have clients that raise a lot more money than we do, although we raise a lot of money. He said, but they all have cash. They don't need us. So you have cash, but you always need to get more cash. So you need us. So he finally convinced me that I had the best business in the world.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please, Mr. Adelson asked for no media. I see somebody from Call Israel, so it's not going to answer any questions. So please respect it. And thank you very much again. And I would like to just call our next panel, Roy Oron, please.